Right now, behind steel doors and razor wire, sits a man worth more than most CEOs and celebrities combined. Richer than Hollywood royalty, richer than many presidents, kings, and tech founders combined. And yet, he has no freedom, no public life, no official photographs that the world can recognize. His empire, worth billions, his business, built on fear, violence, and absolute control. His prison cell, barely 6 feet wide. So who is he? How do you build a fortune so vast? In the next few minutes, you'll hear the full story from the quiet streets of Sicily to the blood-soaked headlines that shocked a nation.
Matteo Messina Denaro, l'ultimo padrino in cima alla blacklist.
And in the final moments, you will hear his name. The truth is darker and more twisted than you think. Roots of power. Our story begins decades ago in a small town called Castelvetrano. Here, family is everything but for his family. Business didn't mean farming olives or running a shop. It meant something older, more dangerous, more deeply woven into the soil of Sicily. He was born into the Mafia. Not just any Mafia family, the Cosa Nostra. His father wasn't just feared. He was respected. The kind of man whose name alone could make debts disappear, whose handshake was worth more than a legal contract. For most children, inheritance means money. For him, inheritance meant an empire built on silence, loyalty, and violence. From an early age, he learned the code of omertà. Never talk to outsiders, never betray the family, never forget that power is a Nostra. By his early 20s, he wasn't just a member of the Mafia, he was a prince in the shadows. A Rolex glittered on his wrist. Tailored Italian suits hung on his frame. Luxury cars slid quietly through the streets of Sicily, their engines humming like the purr of a predator. But these weren't just the trappings of wealth, they were armor. Every suit, every car, every expensive watch was a silent message. I am untouchable. His was the business of smuggling, extortion, and control. But here's the genius. He didn't keep it all underground. On paper, his fingerprints were on legitimate industries, waste management, renewable wind energy, retail shops, real estate. These companies were like masks, perfectly legal on the outside, laundering blood money on the inside. The genius of his empire was its invisibility. If you looked at the paperwork, everything seemed clean. But behind closed doors, it was dirtier than anyone could imagine. Building a billion-euro empire. From his humble beginnings in Sicily, his reach soon stretched far beyond the island's borders. He strategically planted roots in countries across Europe, South America, and the Middle East, each location serving a unique purpose in his growing empire. Shell companies became his most effective camouflage, each one masking the flow of illicit funds as legitimate business transactions. To an outsider, it looked like a vast and diverse investment portfolio. In reality, it was the skeleton of a billion-euro criminal machine. The machinery of his empire ran on two fuels. For them, obedience wasn't just about respect, it was about survival. In his world, a moment's hesitation could erase decades of loyalty. This culture of unflinching compliance allowed him to control operations across continents without ever having to set foot in most of the territories he dominated. By the 1990s, his financial empire had reached staggering heights. Estimates placed his wealth at more than 4 billion euros, eclipsing the fortunes of some of the most celebrated tech founders of the era. Yet, unlike those entrepreneurs, his wealth never appeared on any rich list, never faced taxes, and never passed through conventional regulation. Every euro was untraceable, every contract enforced not by law, but by the silent shadow of violence. The blood on his hands. His empire didn't rest solely on financial cunning, it was held together by fear and violence. Behind the polished facade of business deals and offshore accounts was a man who treated human life as another expendable asset. He didn't just eliminate rivals, he dismantled them. Prosecutors Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, two of Italy's most celebrated anti-mafia crusaders, became his most high-profile targets. Their assassinations in the early 1990s sent shockwaves through the country, igniting public outrage and drawing global attention to the Mafia's grip on Italy. But to him, they were simply obstacles, and obstacles had to be removed. His ruthlessness reached its darkest point with the case of Giuseppe Di Matteo, To him, violence wasn't desperation, it was strategy. Every bomb, every bullet, every act of cruelty served a purpose: to maintain absolute control. In his world, fear wasn't a byproduct of power, it was the foundation of it, the ghost years. By the late 1990s, Italy's anti-mafia crackdown was in full swing. High-ranking bosses were being arrested, but not his. He vanished completely. No official photographs existed. Rumors spread that he had undergone plastic surgery to change his face. For 3 decades, he lived as a ghost moving between safe houses. To some, he was the last untouchable godfather of the Sicilian Mafia. To others, he was a phantom, a shadow whose real existence was impossible to confirm. The weakness. Even the most feared men have cracks in their armor, and this was his own body. Years spent hiding in shadows, moving from one safe house to another, and living under constant threat had worn him down. The stress, the secrecy, and the strain of always looking over his shoulder left scars no bullet could match. By 2023, those cracks had become impossible to ignore. He was battling advanced colon cancer, a disease that showed no regard for power or reputation. The man who had ordered countless deaths now found himself fighting against his own. But cancer doesn't negotiate, and death doesn't take bribes. Every empire he built, every fortune he amassed, could not buy him a single extra heartbeat. The arrest. It was a cold January morning in 2023 when the hunt finally ended. After 30 years on the run, Matteo Messina Denaro, Italy's last godfather, was in custody. The shadow that had loomed over Sicily for decades had finally stepped into the light. The richest prisoner. The trial wasn't new. He had already been sentenced to multiple life terms in absentia for his many crimes. But now, the state had his body. The end of an era. In September 2023, just 8 months after his capture, he died in custody from cancer. For Italy, his death marked the symbolic end of the Cosa Nostra's golden age. For law enforcement, it was both a victory and a frustration that the man was gone. The lesson. For decades, his name was spoken only in whispers. Matteo Messina Denaro, the last godfather. A man who turned crime into a multinational business and built a fortune so vast, it survived even his own downfall. But his story isn't unique. For every mafia boss brought down, another rises. Somewhere, right now, another billionaire criminal is walking the streets. If you enjoyed uncovering the secrets behind the world's most untouchable criminals, don't let the story end here. Hit like to let us know you want more, share it so others can witness the rise and fall of the last godfather, and subscribe for more gripping stories of power, crime, and the people who think they can outrun justice.